stream is about to start. We'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hi, my name is Leandro Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? Sort of. We are sort of going to write some code together. What we have on the menu today is something completely different, because I was getting tired of writing JS effects and never succeeding into getting parameters to work, the simplest thing. And they were not working. Anyhow, I decided to take a break, and instead today we are going to talk about how I use Hammerspoon for automating some tasks in macOS and just generally making my life easier. I accumulate little snippets of Hammerspoon scripts over time, and I thought it would be a nice opportunity for me to share some of the things I created, some of the things I found, and show you how this stream works, some of the audio setup, some of the video setup, and how to use Hammerspoon to control OBS, how to use Hammerspoon to control REAPER, and plenty of other things as you shall see. So before I even get started, I need to tell what the inspiration for this stream was. It was mostly from watching this episode of the Home Recording Show, in which they talked about automation. And in this case, it was more like automating physical things with smart outlets and that sort of thing. I don't have a lot of that going on, but you could even use Hammerspoon to automate some of that, to integrate with these kinds of things. So what is Hammerspoon? Well, it is just an application that when you first open it, it does nothing. Super exciting, huh? It does nothing. But it allows you to write Lua code. So if you have been watching this series of streams, you may be familiar with Lua because it's the language used in Reaper to write Reaper scripts. And in this case, Hammerspoon is using Lua to write scripts for the operating system in general. It just gives you all these tools and you have to decide what you want to do with them. And you write scripts. There is no like user interface for Hammerspoon. There are no menus to dive through. It's just writing a program that Hammerspoon runs for you. And in this program, you have all these functions you can call given by Hammerspoon. And these functions allow you to control audio devices, as we will see in my configuration. They allow you to change the windows, so you can do things like this. They allow you to tap into the wired and wireless connectivity and many more things. And you can even extend Hammerspoon with other functionalities. So you can receive and send media events. You can, if there is something you can do in the computer, you can probably automate it with Hammerspoon in one way or another. It's not always easy. In many cases, it's not worth the effort. So you have to be aware that this may be a rabbit hole. But I find it very useful. And I think I found a middle ground of being useful, but not spending too much time into automating the processes. It's a fine line. It's a fun thing to do. So anyhow, instead of showing you everything that Hammerspoon can do, I will show you what I use Hammerspoon for. So this is my Hammerspoon init file. This is the program, the Lua code that Hammerspoon runs when it starts. And if you're just interested in seeing the code, the link is in the description, of course. So you can go there and grab the code. But fair warning, there are many things here that are specific to my setup, so you will probably have to read and understand and adapt this code. You won't be able to just simply get it and start using it. But hopefully this whole stream will be inspiration for you to get started with Hammerspoon yourself, or maybe it will be the thing you need to know in order to not get into this rabbit hole and save yourself some time. Or even maybe something that you can see and then tell me things that I could be doing better. I'm always open for that. First thing that I use Hammerspoon for is window management. This is probably the hello world, the most basic thing you can do with Hammerspoon. I think it's even in the tutorial for when you're learning Hammerspoon, which is, I guess, something I should mention. One of the, at least for me, most interesting features of Hammerspoon is how well documented it is. You can really go through the docs. It's a lot of reading, but once you go through the docs, you will be able to do a lot. And the documentation is great for all the APIs that exist. It's really good. So, window management. In my case, I do something that is just pretty simple. I like to have a way of, I guess, probably the biggest thing is for me to maximize a window without using the macOS maximization. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Hammerspoon is macOS only. So on Windows, there are other tools like auto hotkey, and on Linux, you can probably automate some of these using shell scripts. But these tools are completely different. You write in different languages, different functionality, nothing to do with Hammerspoon. So anyway, I got into the maximized version of this window in macOS, and you can see that the decoration is gone. And to tell you the truth, I don't even know how to get out of this window. I don't know how to make this small again. See, that's the problem with the macOS maximization. I don't like it because it takes over a whole desktop of sorts. And then how do I get out of that? Okay, like that. But still, it's not super ergonomic. I don't like it. So I tend not to use it. I go with, I guess, the way I used to use Windows and Linux for 20 plus years before I started using macOS, which is to just make the window occupy the whole space of the screen without turning it into its own, whatever this is, a different desktop kind of thing. And there are applications that don't even work all that well and maximized that way. So I have some keyboard shortcuts I can use to maximize windows, but I can also make them go and occupy just 1/4 or 1/2 of the screen. Hello again. For how long have I been gone? This is ridiculous. I bet that these mistakes will happen again and again, because I am using Hammerspoon to automate some aspects of the stream, and I am streaming, so I may make mistakes. Okay, so you lost a minute. God damn it. Okay, so what I was saying, right as I noticed that I was on the wrong screen, I also use Hammerspoon to switch between scenes in OBS, as you will see. Anyway, John is here. Thanks for being here, since it was your show that inspired this conversation in the first place. So very glad that you're here. And thanks, Mage and Fajis, for joining as well. Hello, you all. And Mage is using Auto Hotkey, which is okay. I used it. I don't think it's as powerful as Hammerspoon. Yeah, okay, so you lost me for a minute. I'm not sure what I said in that minute, but I was talking, maybe I will repeat myself then. Bear with me. So I was showing this code that does window management that allows me to like switch the window size like this and occupy halves or quarters of the screen, because I don't like maximizing in macOS, and I don't like maximization in iPad either. I find that this split screen mode here in macOS and in iPadOS is completely confusing. I have no idea how to get out of it. It's terrible. But with Hammerspoon, I can just maximize like I did in Linux and Windows for 20 plus years. That's how I am used to doing things. And now let's get into how this code works, because this is like the simplest thing you can do in Hammerspoon. So it's worth understanding how this is set up. So this is just some Lua code. It has nothing to do with Hammerspoon in particular. And it's just a way for me to abstract some things without having to copy and paste. So I abstract the letters of the keyboard, as well as the geometry that I want the window to occupy, given in terms of X and Y coordinates and width and height. So for instance, when I hit the keyboard shortcut that ends in S, the window goes to the top left and occupies the entire screen. These numbers are between 0 and 1. So width and height of 1 means occupy the whole screen. And for instance, when I hit the keyboard shortcut that ends with Q, I want the window to go to the top left and occupy half of the screen on each axis, which means it goes to the upper left. And then I have this for loop because I want to abstract this code. I don't want to have to copy and paste this code, though you could copy and paste this code. It doesn't look that horrible because it's just 3 lines. But one of the key things you can do with a Hammerspoon is keyboard shortcuts. And these keyboard shortcuts can be global. They can work regardless of the app you have on focus, which of course is essential for something like this that has to do with window management, but it is also useful to work out some kinks in OBS, as I'm going to show later. So you call this function and the script will run when Hammerspoon loads, and it will bind this hotkey. So it will be listening for these keystrokes. Whenever the keystroke happens, it runs a function. And this function can do absolutely anything. It can like turn on your Wi-Fi. It can send an HTTP request. It can change monitors. It can do all sorts of window management things. It can open apps. Whatever you can do in Hammerspoon, which is a lot, you can do by triggering a key. There is also another library that deals with MIDI. So if you don't want to have weird combinations of keys, maybe you ran out of keys on your keyboard, you can get yourself a cheap, like this MIDI controller was $20, and it comes with 16 keys that I can use to automate things. So think of this as like a cheaper and perhaps even more powerful, but more difficult to configure alternative to something like a Stream Deck. A Stream Deck has little displays for each key, which is nice, and it has a whole app that helps you automate things instead of having to write Lua. But this is much cheaper, and I haven't used the Stream Key. Stream Key, is that the name of the thing? That pad with keys? I don't remember the name from that product from Elgato. So anyway, I haven't used, but I don't think that product is as powerful as Hammerspoon. And here are the modifiers. I tend to use these modifiers, which is Control, Option, and Command, because this way I haven't really ran into a single conflict with any application I have ever used. If you use all the 3 modifiers, it is relatively ergonomic to press because they're next to one another on the actual keyboard. And they never conflict with anything. So you'll see that all my keyboard shortcuts in Hammerspoon start with these 3 modifiers. And then the key that comes from here, this key. And then this is how you manipulate windows. You can manipulate windows using Hammerspoon programmatically. So you can move windows to particular places. So I get the focused window. This way I'm not resizing just any window. I'm resizing the window that has the focus. And I give it the position it should go to. And then these 2 parameters are stuff you can read more about in the documentation, but it boils down to make sure that when you're resizing the window, you don't end up with a window that is like this, like it's partially outside the screen. Make sure that that doesn't happen. And then finally, I have another window management keyboard shortcut that is to move the window to another display. So in case I have 2 monitors connected, I can send a window to the other display with this keyboard shortcut, which is my usual modifiers and tab, because it's similar to Command and Tab to switch between applications. And then it will send that to the next screen. So it will move the window that is in focus to the next screen. Again, all of this you can probably learn more about in the most basic tutorials about Hammerspoon. Let's get to more interesting things. This is a script that I actually wrote today and that made me think, hey, perhaps I should do a stream about this whole thing, which is the mouse buttons. Before I get into that, let me see what you all have to say. I did some programming on a Mac in well, it was a long ago, but I remember using Pascal as well at university. It wasn't so bad, but we were doing very basic things. I use an app called Rectangle for this, but it's still interesting to see how to do it another way. Yeah, I used to use Rectangle and it is fine. I uninstalled it because it was doing more than I needed. It was doing way more than just these things. And it was yet another app to install, which is no big deal because it's such a small app. But yeah, and I do like something about Rectangle that is also something that Windows does. Again, something that I think Windows is doing right. You can drag a window to the corner and that will set the window to occupy that corner. Rectangle does that. Windows does that out of the box. And Hammerspoon does not do that, at least not with the script that I have. But yeah, I like that I have Hammerspoon to do this as well as other things without having to install and manage different apps. But wait, yeah, Rectangle is great. And if you are not into programming and you don't want to have to write Lua, Rectangle is the thing to do. Yeah, you can do this with multiple windows. So that's a nice point. There is this concept of a layout in Hammerspoon. So you can, with a single keystroke or with a single event from your MIDI controller or from your phone, or yeah, there are ways for you to trigger actions in Hammerspoon via another device. So in any of those cases, you can fire up multiple apps and you can arrange them on the screen in any way you want. I used to do that. If you go watch my very first videos on this channel, you will see that my face camera was on the corner and every other window was neatly arranged around my face. So I measured the space that my face would occupy on the video, and then I wrote a Hammerspoon script to put all the windows in the right locations to look nice on the screen. I don't do that anymore, but it's something you can do. And you can, yeah, Stream Deck. Yeah, I had the wrong name. It's not Stream Key, it's Stream Deck. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Stream Deck is also capable of doing that, but yeah, you can do like a keyboard shortcut that gets you to streaming mode, and it will open OBS on that display. It will open Reaper here and there. It's something that you can do. I'm working with an AutoHotkey version 2 script to control the resolve color page with my X Touch. Fun. All right. So let's get into mouse buttons. So I have a mouse that I don't know why I'm showing that to this camera. I have another camera. So I have a mouse with the 3 regular buttons, but I also have the forward and backward buttons here on the side. And these buttons work well in applications like Chrome. They go to the previous and the next page. And there are other apps that also do the right thing with these buttons. But there are apps like Safari that don't know what to do with these buttons. Probably because it's not a mouse that has been designed by Apple, so they don't care about integration. And even in apps that are aware of these buttons, like Chrome, they work a bit weird, because if you have your cursor on top of a link, the behavior changes. It becomes pretty much like a middle button where it opens that link on a separate tab. And I don't like that. I think that these buttons should do backward and forward always. Also, when I switched from a touchpad to a mouse, I missed being able to zoom into something. So I wrote this little Hammerspoon script this afternoon, actually, that does all of this that I mentioned. So the first thing you're going to notice is that I'm creating an event tab in pretty much the same way that I am creating this binding of a key. An event tab is going to be something that is similar to this in the sense that it will listen to user input and it will run a function. The difference being that this is just a global keyboard shortcut, while this is pretty much anything. You can listen for buttons on the mouse, you can listen for keyboard shortcuts, and much more. So in this case, I am listening to other mouse down and mouse up events. Other being not the left, the right, or the middle click on the mouse. And then it is going to run this event. It's going to run this function. So you can remap your mouse to do anything. You can remap a left click to do something that is not a left click if you wanted, for instance. Pretty crazy stuff, very powerful. And when you're developing the scripts, you often write something that prevents you from fixing whatever mistake you made. So for instance, you were like remapping your mouse buttons, and then you remap left click to do something wrong. And then you cannot left click on Hammerspoon to reload a script. So anytime you change a script, anytime you change init.lua, you have to reload the configuration. I'm not going to reload because that's going to mess up the stream, but you have to reload the configuration. And then what happens if you cannot click on this because you remapped the left click to the wrong thing? All sorts of fun situations like that. And then you have to find a way of doing things with the keyboard, for instance, because you have to get out of that bad state. Fun stuff. Anyway, you may notice that I am assigning this to a variable. I'm not using this variable anywhere. This is a tricky thing you have to know about some things in Hammerspoon. I'm not sure if event tab is one of them, to be honest. I don't think it is. But there are some things like timers. Instead of reacting to your mouse, a timer is just going to do something on a schedule, like every second. There are some of these things. I know for a fact that binding hotkeys is not one of them, and I know for a fact that timers are one of them. I don't remember about event tabs, so I put this here just to be sure. But the thing is, if you don't assign the thing to a variable, it may be the case that the Lua garbage collector will come and pick up your thing, so your event tab, your timer, that sort of thing. And then your timer stops working arbitrarily at some point without you noticing. Pretty bad stuff. So it is a good practice for you to assign a variable to the timer, to the event tab, or whatever, because that variable is global unless you put local on top of it, but that would defeat the purpose. If this variable is global, it cannot be garbage collected by the Lua garbage collector. And that's because the environment in which this variable exists is still available to you. You can open the Hammerspoon console and you can get a hold, well, maybe not. You should be able to get a hold of some of the variables at least. Yes, probably had a typo somewhere. Yeah, buttons, I had a typo. So you can still get a hold of that event tab. And for this to work, the variable cannot be garbage collected. In case you don't know what garbage collection is, don't worry about it. Just remember to assign variables to the things you create. It is a point where many people will trip. So be aware of that. Anyway, this event tab will listen to my mouse buttons and it will get some properties about that event. So was it a mouse down or mouse up? What button was pressed? Was it the back or the forward button, or there are mice that will have more and more and more buttons? You can do whatever with these buttons. So the way I got the right numbers here was just to print. When I was developing this, I just said print that, and then I would click on the buttons and see what numbers they were. And also flags. These flags are the modifiers on the keyboard that were being held while you were pressing the keyboard, the mouse buttons. So then I check, is this a mouse down button? And is the mouse the backward button or the forward button? Again, these magic numbers I got from printing the button number. So I got this 3 is the back button on my mouse and 4 is the forward button on my mouse. So in that case, what I do is just swallow the event. When you return true from an event tab event handler, that means swallow this event. Don't propagate this event any further. Don't let the underlying applications receive this event. Pretend that the event never happened. And this is, for instance, how you could break a mouse button. Because you're stopping the event, you're swallowing, you're consuming that event. And the typical behavior is that the event would propagate further down to other applications. But Hammerspoon intercepts your events pretty early and it allows you to just discard the event, which is exactly what I'm doing here. Because I don't want anything to happen when I press down the button. I want something to happen when I release it. So if I'm pressing it down, I just don't do anything. But if it's a mouse up, well, then I want to do something. If I'm holding the back button and I have command on the keyboard pressed down, then I want to zoom. Let me show you. I can zoom like this. I'm now pressing my mouse weird little button here. So you can see that I'm zooming in, and this works in photos, it works in Safari, it probably works in drawing applications, though I haven't tested. But it is like that gesture of zooming into the magic trackpad, a gesture that I used to like. Now I can do it with the mouse, and I can even control by how much I'm going to zoom in and out. So this is Hammerspoon allowing you to synthesize events as if you were on a magic trackpad and you started to do the pinch. So you can create that gesture. Pretty powerful stuff, isn't it? And like that, you can synthesize MIDI events, you can synthesize keyboard presses. It's very powerful. And if I don't have command held down, then I want to do that the magic the magic trackpad gesture of swiping to the sides, because that gesture works in Safari to go backwards and forwards, and it also works in Chrome and anywhere else. So I could probably synthesize some keyboard shortcuts that do the same thing, but I thought it would be more elegant to just synthesize the gestures. And perhaps this will work even in other applications, like in Mail app, there is a gesture to archive. I think that the mouse will now do that gesture. I haven't tested, but probably it will work. And this is for the other button. So it does, instead of swiping to left, it swipes to right, and instead of zooming out, it zooms in. But anyway, the principle is the same. And then I start that event tab. And that's pretty much all there is to it. I'm not going to say that this is simple. It's not. But it is very powerful. And I think it already replaced two tools. Rectangle app. And this is probably something you can do with Carabiner Elements, Better Touch tool, or some of those. But hey, it's 60 lines of code so far, and we have already replaced 2 apps. Isn't that fun? And we didn't even get to the more custom stuff. Let's see what you all have to say. Oh, the forward and back buttons drive me nuts. Well, there you go. Perhaps you will want to take this into your Hammerspoon configuration. This is something that stands alone very well. So if this is all you want, you can pretty much just copy and paste. Next, let me show you what I have here on the menu bar. You may have noticed that I have some stuff going on here. That's Hammerspoon. Hammerspoon can create not only text, but it can also create some icons. And you have complete control over what happens when you click, so you can create little menus like this and all of that. So yeah, there is a menu bar thing in Hammerspoon. And here is a timer. Again, I am assigning a variable to prevent garbage collection. And I want this timer to run the function every second. So every second this will run. And what this does is change the text here. So why am I doing all this? macOS already shows me the date and the time on the menu bar. The problem is the format. It shows me that in the US format or in some other languages format, but it doesn't show me the date and the time in the format that I like, which is the ISO standard. I know. But anyway, I wanted to see it in that way because it is unambiguous. It is the way that I tend to write dates when I'm talking to people. And it is the correct way of writing dates, okay? This is not my local way of writing dates, by the way. In Portugal, we don't write dates like this. Back in Brazil, we didn't write dates like this. I don't think there is any one place in the world that writes a date like this, but it is the correct way of writing dates. And you cannot customize that in macOS. So what I did is I hid the date and time widget in macOS, and instead I'm doing my own widget using Hammerspoon. And that needs to update every second because it's a freaking watch. And then I can use Lua to produce something that is in the exact format that I want. Year, month, date, hour, minute, and day of the week. Perfect. But hey, there is more. Yes, there is more. You can put anything, right? You can put anything in this menu bar icon. So there will be things getting into the streaming section here, which is probably the most interesting part. There will be things here that will set some variables that will show me extra information. So this one tells me if my microphone is on or off. For streaming, probably not so useful, but I use pretty much the same setup for meetings. And it may be the case that I need to go somewhere in the middle of a meeting. And there are all these different apps like Zoom and Skype and Discord, and they all may have their own little ways of doing push to talk or mute. I don't want to learn about all the keyboard shortcuts. I want to be able to mute my microphone at the source. And perhaps I could have a MIDI controller. I could have something around that would do this for me. But I'm doing it with Hammerspoon, and I can have the feedback right here on the screen. So maybe if I had something else, I would have some other indication, maybe some light that goes on and off. But here in this case, I just have this icon here. And when I mute my microphone, did you see that? The icon changed. And I also have here the scene in OBS in which I am right now. Of course, you will not be able to see this because if I switch scenes, then you don't see my screen, do you? But this is showing me in which scene I am in OBS at all times, which is helpful when I am in a single monitor setup, like I am right now. So even though I don't have OBS open in any screen for me to see the scene I am in, I know in which scene I'm in. And everyone knows. So everyone sees this, but it's all right. It's a little reminder here. And that's how I noticed before when I pressed the wrong key and went to the wrong scene. That's how I noticed. I saw that this was not saying screen. It happens. So those are these parts. So I have these global variables that I set below and I read from here. So later I will show you how I integrate Hammerspoon with REAPER, that is muting my microphone, and with OBS, which is switching scenes. So I'm just printing stuff here. Here's not the interesting part. Here is just printing stuff. But further below, we'll see how to communicate with these other apps, which is perhaps more interesting. Yeah, this menu bar is really useful. I really like it. It's a very compact, convenient way to give me feedback about things. And of course, these parts are only showing up when I am streaming or in a meeting. They go away, but the time is always there. And you could have this like integrate with your calendar to show you events. You could have this integrate with maybe your smart outlets, because I'm sure your smart outlets will have some sort of HTTP interface that Hammerspoon can talk to. Hammerspoon even has some Stream Deck integration. So I don't know, you could, if there is something that Stream Deck is not doing for you, maybe this could. Right, let's get into the main part of the script. Because so far it was more like a gentle introduction to what you can do with Hammerspoon. This is the more power user stuff. You can see that the script is a lot longer for this bit. So first, on a high level, what am I doing with Hammerspoon for when I'm streaming or on a meeting? First, I change a bunch of things to get into streaming mode. I open OBS, I open REAPER with a specific project, I set up inputs and outputs for audio. I change the resolution of my display because when I'm sharing screens, I want to run at a lower resolution so that things become bigger. Because I have a 4K display, and I usually use it as a 4K display. On YouTube, I'm running 180p. If I tried to stream a 4K display on a 180p stream, everything would look super blurred and small. So I changed the resolution of the display. And yeah, I do all these things that get me into streaming mode and also some things that get me out of streaming mode. So I undo everything when I am done. And also, I have specific keyboard shortcuts that only work while I am streaming so that I can switch scenes, so that I can mute my microphone, so that I can create markers. This is something that I often forget to use, but it's super nice. So I have this keyboard shortcut that takes a timestamp of the stream, and then at the end, it will produce one of those YouTube description things. So I can put in the description of the stream, and it will have chapters. I have a keyboard shortcut that remembers that point. I often forget to use it, but I have it. And there may be other things that I'm forgetting. So let's dive into it. And you may be interested in this because you are streaming, or you may be interested in this because you want to use Hammerspoon to automate something in OBS or REAPER, because I'm going to show you how to do that. So first thing to note is that this hotkey is not your good old hotkey. It is a modal. That is different in the sense that a modal gets you into a stage and then back out of that stage. So if I bind keyboard shortcuts to the modal, as I do here, for instance, this keyboard shortcut only works while I am in that mode. Like I was explaining, I get into streaming mode and out of streaming mode, so there will be some keyboard shortcuts that only work while I'm in streaming mode. And here you may notice that my keyboard shortcut is a bit different. It's not Control, Option, and Command. It is actually Shift and Command. And the reason for that is that the other keyboard shortcuts for taking a screenshot, for starting a video recording in macOS, they are Command, Shift, and 3 and 4 and 5. So I thought it would be cute for me to get into streaming mode, which is sort of like recording a screen, by hitting Command and Shift and 2, because it's right next to it. So this is the modal, and this is how I get out of the modal. So I use the same keyboard shortcut to get in and out of the modal. I could have used other keyboard shortcuts, or I could get into the modal with a keyboard shortcut, but get out of the modal with like a MIDI controller or some HTTP request or something. Now let's see the things that get me into streaming mode. These are some global variables that we are going to encounter later, so we can skip. These are just declarations, so we can skip them for now. So what happens when I am getting into streaming mode? The first thing is, I'm going to show you later, I have several instances of BlackHole, which is this app that allows you to route audio from one app to another in macOS. I have several instances of this running, 4 of them. And BlackHole is great, but it tends to glitch out, especially when you have 4 instances of it. So the first thing I do is this, that resets core audio. It resets the whole audio subsystem in macOS. And that tends to make BlackHole more stable. So it's essentially turn it off and on again right before I'm about to stream. Then I wait for 5 seconds because I want to make sure that core audio has restarted. And there is no way for me, no easy way for me to prompt that core audio has finished restarting. So I wait for 5 seconds. Then I do the thing I mentioned where I resize my screen. I change the resolution of my screen. I turn off Wi-Fi. You can see that Wi-Fi is off. That's because my computer usually has Wi-Fi and Ethernet both enabled. Ethernet for obvious reasons, it is faster. That's what I'm using to stream right now. And Wi-Fi because of AirDrop and other nice macOS utilities that don't work if you have Wi-Fi off. So most of the time I have my Wi-Fi and Ethernet on, but for streaming, if I latch the Wi-Fi on, some apps like OBS will not be clever enough to pick Ethernet, even though it is faster. Sometimes they will choose, sometimes Skype will do that, Zoom, they will prefer Wi-Fi for whatever reason, and then the connection will be bad because Wi-Fi is not as good as Ethernet. So I turn off Wi-Fi because I know I'm not going to use AirDrop in the middle of a stream. or if I will have to turn it on again. Anyway, then there are these 4 instances of BlackHole, and these are the names of the instances. I will get into what they do in a moment, but what I'm doing here in this part of the code is I'm making sure that these BlackHole instances are not muted and that their volume is at 100%, because I will have other places where I can control the volume. So I want this to be at 100%. And you could change here and mute something accidentally, especially because, as you're about to see, I set this BlackHole instances as my default audio device, so that my keys on the keyboard that change the volume and mute are changing the volume and muting BlackHole. And that could lead to problems, because then I wouldn't know what is muted in my chain. So before the stream, I always make sure to reset everything. Then, when I am doing my day-to-day thing, I have my audio interface as my inputs and outputs, because my audio routing is not that complicated. It's just an audio interface I connect my headphones and microphone to, so that I am recording some songs on Reaper or whatever. Audio interface is the way to go. But when I'm streaming, I have a more complicated setup that I will explain in a moment, but I need to get into this stage. And then I have an aggregate device that I call REAPER, and it combines my audio interface with the 4 BlackHole instances. And then I will do some clever internal routing in REAPER. But that means that when I'm getting into streaming mode, I have to essentially do what you would do by clicking here and clicking on one of the other inputs or outputs. I have to do that. I have to switch the inputs and outputs of my operating system. There are some apps like REAPER that allow you to pick a specific audio device, but there are apps like Chrome that will just inherit this decision. So it's essential that you have the right inputs and outputs for your audio setup. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm clicking on those buttons to change my audio setup. That's what these lines are doing. Then I open REAPER with a project that I'm going to show you that does some clever internal routing. I open this app that is necessary for my camera to not shut off, because cameras have this limitation of only recording for 30 minutes, so that they don't have to pay the more expensive taxes in the European Union. It is ridiculous. Anyway, if you have this app open, then my Canon camera will not turn off after 30 minutes and I can stream. So I have to open this. And I also open OBS. All right, before we continue, let's see if you have more comments. All right, so then I'm going to have another event tab, and I will have an event tab for the key down. So I'm going to monitor every key press while I'm streaming or in a meeting. The purpose of this is to show this up here. Someone was watching my, I think it was Ben, who was watching my stream and said, I really like the keyboard shortcuts you use in Visual Studio Code. I would love to learn them. Can you use something like Keycaster? So I installed Keycaster for a while. I didn't like how you cannot customize some aspects of the display. It shows you basically what Keycaster does is it shows you these kinds of things. It shows you the keyboard shortcuts you're pressing. I didn't like how Keycaster didn't allow me to customize some things about the display, and I didn't like that anytime I would open it, it wouldn't know where to display. I would have to click and drag the visualizer to a place that I liked, and it would forget it for next time. Perhaps because I am changing the resolution of the display, I don't know, but it was forgetting it. So I recreated Keycaster using Hammerspoon, and that's what you see here up top. I will not get into everything that is in this code. It's similar to the code we saw above. There is an event tab for anytime I press a key. I get the modifiers if I'm holding Command or Shift or whatever. I get the character that was pressed. I bail out early in case it's not a keyboard shortcut, so that when I'm just typing, you don't see each letter as it appears. Then I use the Hammerspoon alert facility with some customization to actually display this little box. I also change some characters to look nicer. So that I do, for instance, if I do control space, it shows up like this, which is a bit nicer because it is the bunch of icons that is actually used by the operating system. And then this is for me to customize where this box appears, what colors it uses, and so on. Pretty powerful stuff, huh? So we now changed, I guess we replaced a third application with Hammerspoon, Keycaster in this case. And all of that was what? 40 lines of code or something. Neat. And then there is this timer. Similar to the timer we saw above to draw the menu bar, this timer will talk to REAPER and it will talk to OBS. It will talk to REAPER to query what's the state of the microphone, and it will query OBS to say what is the scene that is currently on the stream. To talk to REAPER, I use the HTTP server that comes with REAPER. So this is the REAPER settings. You can come to Control OSC Web, and you can add a browser interface. The browser interface is generally accessed via the browser. So you would go to Safari or Chrome, visit this address, and you would see some user interface. You could even do this from another device. So you could be on the studio somewhere with your phone, accessing REAPER on the main computer via the web browser interface. In this case, I am not using this from another device. I'm using this from the same device, but I'm using it from Hammerspoon. So there is this incantation here. It's kind of convoluted the way that this reads, but it will do an HTTP request using the REAPER API, using that web server that REAPER started. And this is how you query what's the state of track 2. I have this special REAPER project that was opened here that handles the whole audio for my streams. Track 2 is my microphone. The way that I turn off my microphone, the way that we turn this red circle into a black square, the way that I mute my microphone, is just by turning off this from being on record armed. If I turn this off, so yeah, my microphone goes off. And I'm querying what's the state of that track. And this is the REAPER response from that web server. And I have to do a bunch of checks here to make sure that the server is even running, because I may have closed REAPER. REAPER will have been opened by this line, but I may close REAPER later. So it will check that the response is actually there, that it's not empty. It will do some massaging on the data that comes back, because the data that comes back from this call is not simply your microphone is on or your microphone is off. It's actually this whole line that tells you track 2 is called microphone. And then here is some flags about whether it's record arm, it's muted, it's soloed, blah, blah, blah. And then some more information. You can read the REAPER documentation about the HTTP server to understand what all of these lines are telling you. And if you are interested in this documentation, it's very well hidden. So I'm going to show you where it is. It's very well hidden. You should know how to get there if you want to automate things in REAPER from the outside, which is, by the way, so this is the kind of interface you could access, for instance, from your phone. And this is kind of cool that you can use the HTTP interface via Hammerspoon, because that means you can have a feature that Reaper does not have, which is global keyboard shortcuts. You can have a global keyboard shortcut. You can do a keyboard shortcut like I have to turn off my microphone, even if Reaper is not in focus. That's something that Reaper doesn't know how to do. It doesn't know how to have keyboard shortcuts that work if your focus is not in Reaper. And using Hammerspoon, you can work around that. So anyway, you open the usual web interface for Reaper. And here you open the developer tools, you will find this script called main.js. And then there is some documentation here. And that's how I learned which requests to make and how to interpret the results. Very well hidden, but it's there, so that's how you get to it. And then to actually massage this data that comes out, this is what I'm doing here. So I'm splitting things on the tab. I am getting the 4th position. I am doing a bit mask. I am doing some comparisons. Eventually, I say either it is on or it's off. Great stuff. Then that's the end of it. It's kind of complicated. These lines are not trivial, but it's 5 lines and you can control Reaper from a distance. Isn't that cool? I find this very cool. Next, OBS. So to control OBS, it's not an HTTP server, it's a WebSockets server. But luckily, Hammerspoon also knows how to speak WebSockets. Great. So there is a bit more to how you actually connect to OBS. It's not simply making an HTTP call. WebSockets are a bit more complicated. You first have to establish a connection, then you have to authenticate with password, with username and password. Or not. In my case, I don't have that enabled. I don't have username and password enabled, but still I have to authenticate without username and password. So you have to establish that connection first, and this is what I'm doing. I'm checking if my global variable, it's one of those global variables here. I'm checking if my global variable is actually connected, if my WebSockets connection has been established. If it hasn't, then I call this function that will make the connection. We'll see that function below. But assuming that everything is okay, I can send an OBS WebSockets call to get the current scene. So right now, the screen scene is this scene that I'm on, and this is what you see up here. And how do I learn about this? Well, there is some documentation that is great in the sense that it's complete, but I don't find it very easy to read. It's a bit of work to get in there. But yeah, there is this thing called OBS WebSocket. It comes with OBS starting version 28. And before that, you had to install a separate thing. But you go to this website for OBS WebSocket, and I think you go to this document. And you have to be using OBS WebSockets 5 on OBS 28. And then you read this, and it will explain everything you need to do in order to establish a connection, make requests, receive responses. I don't love this API. I find that an HTTP API would be much simpler, but I get it. Because, for instance, this needs to know which tracks are on and off in Reaper. And to do that, it does something silly, which is to query Reaper over and over and over. See all these requests going out? It's kind of ridiculous that it has to do that. And using WebSockets, you don't have to do that. You can have a connection that is open and receive events when they occur, which is much smarter. It saves resources. But it's more difficult to use. Anyway, this is the request you make to ask what is the current scene, so that I can display it here. Right, we'll see more about this later. We'll see how to connect using OBS WebSockets in a moment. But let's see what's next. It's the function that runs when I am getting out of streaming mode. What happens is I switch back to my 4K display, I turn on the Wi-Fi, I switch back to my audio interface as the default inputs and outputs, I stop the event taps to display this thing here, I don't need that anymore, I stop the other timer that was querying Reaper and OBS, I set all these things to nil so that they don't show up here anymore. And I close the connection with OBS. Right. It's pretty much the converse of this function. In fact, when I was developing the exit function, where is the exit function? When I was developing the exit function, I had it side by side with the entered function, and I was just matching, making sure that everything that I do here, I undo there. Right, now let's look at some of the keyboard shortcuts that only exist when I am streaming or in a meeting. So I have this that will mute the microphone, and it will do that by communicating with Reaper. Again, I have a global keyboard shortcut that works in any app, no matter what app is in focus. I can talk to Reaper by using this. In this case, I'm using my usual modifiers with the letter U, and I'm sending this HTTP request that will toggle the record armed situation in Reaper. Here, I can show you this with Reaper open. So without touching the mouse, I can even have Reaper not be the application in focus. Right now, Visual Studio Code is in focus, and I can press and toggle the record armed situation in Reaper. No comments yet, just watching. Sure. Oh my God, you recreated Keycaster in Hammerspoon. I did, yeah. And it was not that hard either. And I think it is better because now Keycaster, now my version of Keycaster, I can customize its appearance much better. I can customize the icons that will represent things. I can customize what needs to be shown or not. In Keycaster, you sort of have some control over some of these things, but not a whole lot. And now I have precise control over exactly what I want. Pedro is here. Hello. Hey dude, how is it going? Been following you for a while. Just arrived on the stream. Good to see you. Good to see you, Pedro. Have you only coded related to Reaper, or do you do other sort of software? I do other things. Lately, it has been Reaper focused, but I have done some web development here on this stream in the past. We worked on some Node.js packages. I have done a desktop application to draw on top of your computer screen, which is incidentally something you could also do in Hammerspoon. But I wanted the app to be multi-platform. And I have been doing some electronics related to music production, but electronics. And in terms of coding, I think that's pretty much it. We also do music production, so we talk about writing songs and mixing and mastering and that sort of thing. Hope that answers the question. Right, so coming back to this, we were here. Now, I will show you how I do scene transitions in OBS. And you may be wondering, why? OBS has a way to set keyboard shortcuts to things like changing scenes. True, but there are some problems, particularly when I changed to Mac with an M1 processor. These keyboard shortcuts don't work reliably. Either they stop working after a while, or now in OBS 28, the keyboard shortcuts that I like with Command and Option and Control don't work when OBS is in focus. There are some GitHub issues about this that I'm contributing to and trying to help OBS people to figure this out. It's a bit weird. It's kind of crazy. And this is only keyboard, right? What if you wanted to control things with MIDI? What if you wanted to control things from another device? You need OBS WebSocket for that. And I find that using this is great, especially because you have this kind of visualization here. I like this much better. And Hammerspoon, unlike OBS, is 100% reliable. I haven't had a single situation in which I pressed the key and it didn't activate. Hammerspoon knows how to bind to global keyboard events in macOS, while OBS kind of iffy. Hammerspoon works flawlessly, M1, Intel, doesn't matter, works every time, much more reliable. So I don't use OBS to do hotkeys. You can see that there are no hotkeys assigned. Instead, I use Hammerspoon. Much better in my opinion. And the way that this works is not so complicated. Again, we are doing binding of a keyboard shortcut using that model that I talked about before, using my usual modifiers. Again, I have that notion of a for loop. This is just Lua. It's nothing Hammerspoon specific. But I have this to prevent this whole block of having to be copied and pasted. So I assign things to different keys. And here I have the scene names that I want to switch to. So again, if the WebSockets connection is not on, I will create it. But if it is on, then this is how I send a message using OBS WebSocket to set the current program scene to that. And that's it. That's how you communicate with OBS over WebSockets. Then I have this. This keyboard shortcut is that marker thing that I talked about, that I should have been using on this stream. But again, it's hard. You forget about this because you are making sure that the stream is okay. You're trying to interact with the chat. You are trying to speak eloquently, think about code. It's complicated. I forget to put the markers. But what this does is when I press this hotkey, it will query what is the stream status, or if I am recording a video, what is the record status of that video. This way it will look into this. Come on, yeah. It will look into this, which is the timestamp of the stream or the recording. And it will put that information in a file. Let me see if I can open that file real quick. So naturally, the point is not that you will have this file open. You will open this file after the stream is over or after the recording is over. But when I press the hotkey, it adds a timestamp on that file. And then I can copy and paste this and add descriptions like this is when, or maybe this is a bad YouTube chapter, but something like showing markers in recordings. And it becomes a YouTube chapter. And that's for when I'm streaming. When I am recording, it will also create this file. But when I am recording, these are probably timestamps where I want to edit something. So I have an idea of what I want to record, and when I'm recording, I don't speak eloquently 100% of the time. So I redo the same lines 1,000 times. When I get it right, bam, marker. And then I go to the next line I want to say, and I try it 1,000 times. English is my second language. I suck at it. You know, you are watching this stream. I don't have to tell you. So I try the same line 1,000 times. I get it. Marker. I try it 1,000 times. I get it. Marker. In the end of the recording, I have a video file and I have my markers file. I can copy this, go into a fresh Reaper instance because I don't want to mess with this stream, put my video on the timeline, and then run my action. Did I forget the name of? It has been a while. I think it has to do with markers. Yes, that. I run this. It becomes a bunch of markers on my timeline, and I can chop away the parts that I liked. And that's that. And in the name of this action, you can see that actually this is following, again, I'm sort of replacing software with Hammerspoon. There is this OBS extension called Info Writer that does exactly what I just described, except that it's even better because it puts the markers not on a separate text file. It puts the marker in the video file itself, and Reaper can read that. So it's pretty great. The problem is that it has, to the best of my knowledge, has not been updated to Reaper 28, and plugins have to be modified to work in OBS 28. Did I say Reaper 28? I meant OBS 28. So this plugin, as far as I know, has not been updated. It doesn't work anymore in latest versions of OBS. And I think it had a bit less control over the keyboard shortcuts or something. I don't know. But in any case, this little Hammerspoon script sort of, along with this other script in Reaper, sort of replace Info Writer. So if I double click this, oh, no item selected. Yeah, I had to have an item on the timeline for this script to work. Anyway, that's how I do my recordings and how I can edit stuff real quick, because I know where the good takes are. Next, this is how you establish an OBS WebSocket connection. First, you use the Hammerspoon WebSocket facility. This is the address that you configured in OBS WebSocket Tools, OBS WebSocket Settings. This is the device, the server port, 4455, 4455. That's the default. And then you create this object that is the connection. This is the object that we have called methods on before. And then in this object, you also, when you're creating this object, you also pass a function that responds to WebSocket events. So anytime that anything happens in OBS, this function will be called via the WebSocket. These are things like a scene has changed. These are things like a source has been hidden. Plenty of things. I forget. There are thousands of events. They are documented in that file I showed you before. This file. It's quite long. Check this out. Never ends. Everything that happens in OBS will go through this. I have a call to print that I commented out. This was helpful while developing this, so I could see what messages we're getting in. And then I do some work to decode, because the messages are communicated using JSON, which is this text format for structured data. I check what kind of opcode came with the message. I was just reading this documentation and reading what came from OBS and writing this. And this is what you have to do to establish a connection. You have to send this message saying what remote procedure call protocol we were using. This is just boilerplate. You can, if you want to do this, you can pretty much just copy and paste this. Hopefully it will work for you. Then I have some events that I received that I'm interested in. For instance, if I have changed the scene, I will change this variable with the event name, with the scene name. I would change this variable, and this variable is one of those globals that we saw above. It's one of these. It's the last global. It is here. And that's what's printed to me right here in the menu bar. So that's how everything is connected in the end. And similarly, I also changed this variable if this other message arrives. So this is the event that happens even if I have not changed this scene using my keyboard shortcut. I could come in the main OBS interface and click around to switch scenes. That will capture that. And this will capture things that happen when I press the keyboard shortcuts. I can also get the stream and record status. to do the markers. So before I showed you how that keyboard shortcut sends a message to get the stream status and the record status. That message is received here. I do not love how the send and receive are so far apart in the code, but the abstractions necessary to make this more beautiful were so messy. I ended up with this. Anyway, so this will get that message coming from OBS. And I guess this is another thing I don't like about OBS WebSockets. Because it's based on WebSockets, the request and the response have to be connected by your program. Unlike HTTP requests that have a concept of request response, WebSockets don't have a concept of request response, so they sort of recreated the concept on top of WebSockets. It's a bit insane in my opinion. But anyway, we have these request IDs, and then when we get the request ID back, we go into that markers file I showed you before, and we append to that with the particular format that I like. All right, so that's the end of the useful part of the file. There are some comments here on things that I would like to do in the future. In particular, this snippet here is super cool. It is, you know how on Windows you can click on the wheel, on the mouse wheel, a middle click, and then there is this little circle that comes up, and then you can move your cursor up or down to auto scroll. I think that's brilliant design. I love auto scrolling on Windows. I would like to recreate that in macOS. There are, again, some apps that do this. Some of them are paid even. They are tricky to set up. Hammerspoon can do this very well. You just have to synthesize scroll events. And perhaps even for bonus points, you can draw a little circle on this screen and everything. All of those things Hammerspoon can do. Right. Zach is here. Swag. There are a couple more things that I want to explain about this setup. So this is not necessarily having to do with Hammerspoon, but they have to do with how I use BlackHole, how I use REAPER, and how I use OBS. Tricks I learned along the way, things that people often don't talk about. So if you're new to OBS, you will probably not understand most of what I'm going to say because I'm not going to cover the basics, like how to create scenes, what are sources, and whatnot. Not interested in the basics here because the basics have been covered by many people very well. But there are a couple tricks that I want to share. One of these tricks is the keyboard shortcut thing in macOS with the M1 processor. Use Hammerspoon instead. It works better. Second, I found that when I switched to this kind of scene and back into the computer scene, for a split second, it would be showing what was on the screen when I last switched away from this. So perhaps I would have like OBS on my screen like I have right now. Then I would switch to my face camera, and then I would switch back to my screen. And for a split second, it would show OBS, and then it would switch to Safari. So it would show for a split second what was on the screen before I transitioned, which could be embarrassing because maybe you were like setting everything up, making sure that you look good, and then you switch to your face camera, you get into a Zoom call, you switch to this screen view, and then you're like checking if you have something on your teeth for a split second. That's embarrassing. So that's tip number 2. It is what I call the sources keep alive. This source looks like this. Yeah, that's right. It looks like nothing. This source doesn't have anything on the screen. But it does have every source that I use. So my camera, my computer screen, secondary cameras, all my guests on Skype, all of those sources exist on this sources keep alive. But they are all out of the drawing canvas. So you just click and drag them out of the drawing canvas. They are still being used, so the sources are still active, but they are not shown. And then I add this sources keep alive to every scene in OBS. That's why it has this star. It's kind of special. So you can add a scene as a source in another scene. Scenes can be nested. One of the types of source is scene, right there. So these sources are active in every screen, including the starting soon, the thanks for watching. All of these scenes have all the sources in them, but they are outside the canvas. You don't see them. But because they are still there and they are active, OBS knows that it needs to keep everything up to date. So it knows that it needs to keep my screen up to date. And then it doesn't do that weird split-second problem that I mentioned. Very tricky problem, kind of hacky solution, but that's what I found works best for me. And I do believe it increases the CPU use ever so slightly because it never lets the sources rest. Even if the sources are not used in the stream at all, like I don't have guests on Skype today, and still this sources keep alive has 5 sources for Skype windows. They are there, they're consuming some CPU. Whatever, at least I don't have weird glitches when transitioning between scenes. So there you have it. That's probably a tip that you may have not heard. And you may not have had this problem to begin with. But anyway, thought I would share that. The second is, again, using, or I guess the third. The third, and I guess final OBS trick is this scene within a scene situation again. What I do is I have all these sources like my desk and the screen and my Windows computer, which is not on right now, and the screen of a guest on Skype, which is not on right now. But all of these, I used to have separate scenes for each of them. And then I would recreate this overlay with my own face, with my guests' faces. I would recreate this in every scene. And then if I had another guest, I would have to switch everything in every scene. And when I switched between scenes, it would be inconsistent. It's much better to have a scene. In this case, again, I have a star because it's kind of special. It's called overlay. And in this scene, I have people here at the bottom. And I put that as a source in other scenes. This way it's consistent and it's much easier for me to manage. If I have a guest, I go to the overlay scene, I turn something on or off, move people around as needed, and then I can rest assured that I can go to any source and it will show up consistently. See, I can switch between them and I don't move around as I used to. So there you go, 3 tips for how to manage the sources and scenes and keyboard shortcuts in OBS. Next, I want to move to Sound, Reaper, and BlackHole. Oh, and John is saying, OBS 28 is great on M1, right? Yes, it is. The only plugin that I used to use 2 plugins, OBS WebSocket and OBS NDI. OBS WebSocket has been merged into mainline. The only plugin left is OBS NDI. And plugins are really the reason why people were holding back on OBS 28, because otherwise it is awesome. But the plugins have to adapt. They have to be updated to a new API. Depending on the developers, they may not be active anymore. Your plugins break, you are set. So my only plugin that I missed was OBS NDI, so I'm using the alpha version, which is available on GitHub. Has been working great so far. One little glitch in one stream, but working great so far. And the CPU use, it is the first time that I see a difference between native and running under Rosetta 2 because it's an Intel app. I never noticed a difference. But in OBS, it makes a lot of a difference. It's from 15 to 20% CPU down to 7. So half of the CPU. And it is super stable and everything. So that's what I'm using. OBS WebSockets has been merged into mainline. OBS NDI using the alpha release. And I don't use any other plugins. So it has been working great, and the CPU use is much different. It's awesome. And yeah, and I guess I could have been using other extensions like InfoWriter, but I just wrote my own thing in Hammerspoon. So yeah, it is great. I like it a lot. And the Keep Alive is a useful chip. Oh, yeah. And yeah, so Keep Alive is a great chip. In fact, I did not come up with it. The thing I use to do my secondary camera, my desk camera, is OBS camera. And it was in the docs here somewhere that they mentioned that this problem could also occur in OBS camera, in this app. And they mentioned that you could have this Keep Alive thing. Then I extended it to everything. I now have a Keep Alive with every source, which also comes in handy from time to time when I am doing something like I want to sync my voice with the camera. Tricky problem. The delay is not consistent. I'm probably out of sync as I speak this, but I do my best to sync. So I have to delay many sources. Not just one, I have to delay many sources. So it's useful to have this Keep Alive scene because I know that I can go into this scene, apply the same filter to every source, and I will be good to go. So I calibrate the delay. I go into filters, calibrate a render delay. I think I can show you, for instance, on this source, there is a render delay. I calibrate, that's the amount of latency introduced by my cam link on average. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but on average it's 400 milliseconds the cam link is introducing. And then I can create this filter, and then I can go to the sources Keep Alive, which I will not go to right now, otherwise you will not be able to see me. But I just right click, go to copy filters, go to the other sources, right click, paste filter, right click, paste filter, and I will know that everything is consistent. So it's a good way to know that all your sources have the filters they need without having to visit every scene. Because the source being the same across scenes, it preserves the filters. But I said I wouldn't go into the details of OBS, so I will not explain this too much in depth. Go watch Apple's Vox, for instance. And then John is asking, why is my stream audio not global? I will talk about that right now. My audio and BlackHole and REAPER audio routing situation. And I will explain why that is. Because of OBS 28, I could remove a second computer from my setup. Much simpler, and I can do 2 4K cameras. Awesome. Yeah. Having a single computer is handy. Not always the best if you're doing something heavy, but it's much more ergonomic. Anyhow, why is my audio source not global? I'll tell you why. I have one audio source here, which is this stream. You can see on my audio setup, I don't have desktop audio, I don't have any microphones, I don't have any of that. And in terms of, there are 2 ways to do audio in OBS without extensions. There are some plugins that extend this functionality with more advanced mixer settings. But using vanilla OBS, you can have your global audio devices. I don't have any. And you can have your sources that are audio devices. If you have a global audio device, as far as I know, it's always active. And I don't want that because I want to be able to go to my starting soon or thanks for watching screens without my microphone being broadcast. So there may be other ways of doing this, but when I did my research, I wanted to have a starting soon or thanks for watching screens without my microphone. And the only way I learned how to do that was to turn off global audio devices and put your microphone as a source on each scene that needs the microphone. So you would not put this as sources on these scenes. And that's what I do. So these scenes don't have this source, but that scene does have this source. And that's how I can, like when I'm with guests, I can be talking to them while the intro song is playing. and my microphone is not being broadcast. Or perhaps even more crucially, if I go to "will be right back," it means that something went wrong. I have to fix something. Sometimes it happens. So when I go to this scene, I definitely don't want my microphone to be broadcast. And I don't want to have to remember to click into places for me to go into this. I know that if I am on this scene, I am good to do whatever I need to do. So that's why I don't have global audio sources. I don't find them useful. But then you may notice that I have only one audio source here, and that's the same audio source in every scene. And that's because I don't do audio in OBS. I do all my audio in Reaper, and then I feed that to OBS. And the reason why I do that is that I want to have more control than the audio mixer in OBS gives me. So I will need to do some a mix minus for my guests, that sort of thing. Is very difficult, if not impossible, to do with this audio mixer. So I wanted Reaper for that, and also because I want to apply some processing to my voice. So I wanted to use Reaper effects for that. So what happens is I have 4 BlackHole instances that I'm going to explain how they work in a moment. Everything is mixed and effects are applied to these sources in Reaper. Reaper produces a single audio output that is this stream audio output. It's a BlackHole instance, and that's what OBS sees. Except for the Windows machine, because that one is connected via OBS NDI. It's a whole different story, but never mind this source. You can see that every other source is muted. I don't capture the audio of my guests on Skype via OBS NDI. I capture that using BlackHole. I'm going to show you that in a moment. Steinberg Dorico, a music manuscripts app, has a socket API, but you need to pay for a license and key to use it. Oh no. Well, they want to make money, right? And these people tend to be the power users. I guess I would consider myself a power user from OBS, even if my OBS stream looks like just chroma key and a screen. It looks super simple, but you can see that it's quite convoluted, and it took me the longest time to get here. So I consider myself a power user for using Hammerspoon like that and whatnot. Yeah, I was just talking about you. So hello, thanks for joining us. Yes, you should watch from the beginning, especially because it was you, if I remember correctly, who asked for this, for the Keycaster thing, which I recreated in Hammerspoon. And I explained before how I did that. And yeah, in your streams, if I remember correctly, you don't have that problem of global microphones because your microphone is being broadcast even on the starting soon screen. And I understand, that's a nice style. But in my case, I prefer not to have that. I keep forgetting to fix the delay on my screen capture audio in OBS. Yeah, it is. There is nothing, I mentioned this many times, there is nothing I can do about the sync because sometimes the desync between camera and audio drifts apart in the middle of the stream, and it appears to be arbitrary. The mixer really sucks in OBS. There is an extension that tries to improve on things. I haven't tried it. I use Reaper. I like Reaper for this. I think it works very well. I'm using Ground Control Caster for the audio routing. It has lots of I/O effects and mixer. Nice. I don't think I saw this before, but the name isn't strange to me. Yeah, I have been here before. Yeah, I thought that everyone at this point would be using either BlackHole or Loopback by Rogue Amoeba, but interesting. I'll check this out. Though I'm kind of happy with my solution, I will not probably fiddle with that. But yeah, it was you. So yeah, I recreated Keycaster in Hammerspoon for reasons that I explained before. You should check it out. And you have a hardware mute for your microphone. That is nice. Yes, I thought about having something like that. I decided that this was the approach for me. Anyway. Oh, you also have loopback. Yeah, BlackHole, it works very well for me. Aria, for people who don't know, from IDDQD Sound, the YouTube channel, Aria and I stream together often. He uses BlackHole as well, and it never works for him. It works for me quite well. Your mileage may vary, but at least the community and the maintainer of BlackHole is very responsive. So if you are that kind of person who is willing to, instead of paying for an app, you're willing to go jump through the hoops to make open source software work for you and perhaps even contribute back with issue reports and that sort of thing and testing alpha releases. If you're that kind of person, like I am some of the times, then consider using BlackHole because it is open source and everything. And the community behind it is strong. They do fix things. They do read your bug reports. And I like the person. I like that guy. He's a nice developer. Fotis asks, if I may ask, how close are you to hitting the 4,000 view hours YouTube mark? Okay, I will switch to this scene real quick because I'm not sure I can share everything on my YouTube Studio page. But maybe I can share this screen. It doesn't look like there are any private tokens here. So yeah, I have a new achievement. That's cool. And it has been my birthday, but also my channel's birthday recently. So that's cool. And this is how many subscribers I currently have, which is absolutely bananas to me. It is crazy that this many people are interested in this kind of nerdy topic. But you are asking about something else. You are asking about this, the public watch hours. I am this far from being able to get into the partner program. I use ASIO Link Pro on Windows. I also don't know of that one. I will check it out. It takes a while to learn, but it's great. A shame the developer... Oh, that's too bad. Was it open source? Are other people picking it up? Right. So, BlackHole and Reaper. I already explained why. I wanted more control. I wanted my VSTs. And, well, that's pretty much it, actually. I wanted more control. I wanted my VSTs. This is the Reaper project, but let's start with Hammerspoon, because that will give you a high-level picture of how things are connected. So I have 4 BlackHole instances. If you want to have more BlackHole instances, you have to download the source code and compile it yourself. That means that you need to install Xcode, and that's 10 gigabytes. And you have to learn how Xcode works. You have to know how to click around in Xcode. Luckily, there is a stream, maybe here, maybe over at IDDQD Sound. I don't remember in which channel we were streaming, but Aria and I went through the process of compiling BlackHole from scratch. And the documentation in the BlackHole repository is great. If you're using something like Loopback from Rogue Amoeba, it's much simpler to use. The result is pretty much the same. You get different ways of piping audio through applications. That's all there is to it. So the first BlackHole instance is what I call the computer. And that's where all the computer sounds go to. So if I am doing a stream in which I am doing music production in Reaper, the output of that Reaper instance will go to computer. You can see that computer was set by Hammerspoon as the defaults for system alerts and for any app that wants to use the audio. So if I am on a stream and I want to go to YouTube and play a video, it will play through BlackHole computer. It will play through that. But that does not mean that I will be able to hear it. It will go to BlackHole, and it may die there if I don't do something about it. So that's where this Reaper project comes in. I have here an aggregate device that puts my audio interface along with the computer BlackHole instance. And I have a track in which the computer instance is being recorded. I don't have really recording going, but this makes it available for input monitoring, and I route this track to me. So this is a track that has, you can see that on this Reaper project, there is no master output. I do a hardware output to my audio interface so that I can put on my headphones and I can hear stuff happening on my computer. Very roundabout way of hearing something that is happening on your computer. But the advantage of doing that is that the whole sound of my computer is available to me on a track in Reaper. If I wanted to, I could mute that, I could lower the volume, I could put some kind of expander so that the volume goes down as I speak. All of that is available to me here. Right now I'm not doing much, but I can if necessary. So that's the first BlackHole instance. It's coming here and it's going to me directly. The next BlackHole instance is the call input. That's for when I have guests. I will send some stuff using Reaper. I will send some stuff to this track, to the call input track. Again, a hardware output going to this BlackHole instance. So I will send to that my microphone and the sounds from my computer. Essentially what I'm doing is a mix minus, because the stream, as we will see later, the stream hears my microphone, my computer, and the guest. But the guest doesn't hear themselves. It's a mix minus for the guest on Skype. And this call input is what I set as my microphone on Skype. My microphone is going there, but also my computer audio is going there. So people on the call on Skype can hear what my computer is doing. For instance, when I'm doing music production, they can hear what's happening in my Reaper instance, but they will not hear themselves. So that's why I need this separate BlackHole instance for this. Next, call output. As the speaker in Skype, I don't put my audio interface so that I can hear people. No, I don't even put computer there, because if I did, then people would hear themselves via this output, because it would go to computer and back to them, because computer is going to them. So no, I have a separate BlackHole instance called call output that captures just the voice of the speaker, just the voice of the guest, just the other person on the call. And then I bring that in here. So I have a BlackHole instance called call output, which is my speaker on Skype. And that's what is here. And then I can select that I want to hear that and the stream wants to hear that, but not the call itself. So they don't hear themselves. Again, that whole mix minus situation I explained. And then at this point here on Reaper, I can again put effects. I have some recomps. For instance, this is, by the way, if you're interested, this is how people always say that limiters are just compressors with a high ratio and a fast attack. That's only partially true. I have a video about this on Toucan Studio's channel. I introduced limiter 3. You can go watch that if you're interested. But I mentioned how the whole story is not like that. In this case, I am streaming, so I want zero latency. I want absolutely no overs at all. I am okay with a little bit of distortion here and there if things get too loud. And this is how you set recomp to behave like that. Fast attack, infinite ratio, no RMS, and this is the threshold. So this acts like a compressor with infinite rate. It acts like a limiter for streaming, no overs, no latency, a little bit of distortion when things get loud, but it's mostly masked by the loud thing, so you don't hear the distortion. It's not abrasive, I don't think. Anyway, tangent. So I can put my effects on the way out. I can put effects on the way in. This is my microphone chain. And I can even put some delays, because remember, my camera introduces via the cam link 400 milliseconds of delay. So I take the audio that is going to go to the stream or to people on Skype, and I delay that by 400 milliseconds by using redelay no dry signal, just wet, 400 milliseconds, no feedback. And this is what you hear on the stream. That's the audio source that is here. So I bake the whole audio in Reaper and I send that to OBS, and that's what you're hearing right now. So I end up with 4 BlackHole instances to capture my computer audio, to select exactly what people will hear on a call with me on Skype, to capture their voice coming out of Skype without feeding back, and then something that is for you to hear on the stream. 4 BlackHole instances. That's how I do my audio setup, and I will not dive into this effects chain anymore. We did a 6-hour long stream. It was my longest stream. I think it was on my channel, and we talked about some of this. Some of this has changed. But anyway, yeah, it's pretty simple stuff. It's just the stock plugins in Reaper. I think that probably the most interesting, clever bit is how to use recomp as a limiter. And that concludes the story of the audio setup. I hope this explains why I don't have a global microphone in OBS, and explains much more that you may or may not be interested in knowing. With that, it concludes this stream. I explained how I do a lot of automation and control things using Hammerspoon. I showed how Hammerspoon can control OBS and can control Reaper, even if Reaper is not in focus, and how it can like change the resolution of the display, how it can substitute several apps like Keycaster, lots of good stuff. And I also showed my whole OBS setup and my whole Reaper setup, which is a whole lot, and BlackHole as well. So lots of things there. Hope you liked some of these. I hope it applies to you. If you find something that you think I should be doing differently, let me know. And that's it for this week. On Monday, probably I will be back to my JS effects nightmare with parameters. And on Tuesday, probably we will stream together, Arya and I, on his channel, and we will continue that song that we are working on, that experimental song that we are working on. So yeah, people are saying their goodbyes. Thank you for this video. I will keep referring to it as a tutorial. Yeah, that's more or less the intent, except that I prefer to stream because I have real-time feedback if I am like messing things up. And if people have questions, I just prefer this format, and it is less work than doing videos. I don't want to say that because it's a lot of work to prepare all this and stream for a couple hours, but then I don't have to edit. Anyway, yeah, I'm glad that you took something out of this, and that you joined me for this long. It has been a long stream. Do you know how to use SketchUp or similar software? I don't think so. No, I have used it for so long ago that I don't remember anymore. Yeah, I don't tend to do any 3D stuff. I think it would be fun to maybe have a 3D printer or something. But no, I don't have any experience with that. All right, so thank you to Mage, John, Fotis, Ben, and Zach and Pedro for joining me on the chat. Thank you to everyone else who is watching this now or in the future. And yeah, I see you on Monday for some more JS effects, then on Tuesday for some music production over at IDDQD. Have a great weekend. Thanks for joining me. I see you. Bye. Thank you for watching the stream. You know how great it has been. Or maybe it sucked, and I am glad that you stuck with me. And soon we'll all be back together for some more coding or talking or chilling. The next time I'll be streaming.